Welcome to the Polgar Chess University. In this lesson, we'll examine an interesting game played between grandmasters Akopian and Almashi. They have reached this interesting position after just 18 moves into the game. You may notice that White has his knight on a7 in a very awkward position, hard to get back to the game from there. Also, Black's knight on a4 is not very well positioned either, could easily get into trouble. Of course, not immediately, because if right now Rook takes the knight, then the Black Queen can checkmate immediately on c1. That would be a major mistake. Therefore, White continued with a natural move, castling. Well, if you look at this position, you'll notice that White is a pawn ahead. But the challenge is what to do if Black right now plays b5, and with that creates a discovered attack on White's knight. Also, Black with his last move has secured the position of the knight on a4. And in this crucial moment, White can use some tactics to save the situation. White responded by playing knight c6, putting the knight on pre. Even though Black can capture that knight, White now immediately can create a pin. However, this is where the interesting part of the game just starts. Black tried to hang on to the extra piece and played knight to d5. Let's see for a moment what would happen if instead Black plays queen e5 and attacks the pawn on e2. Well, then White would just safely gain the bishop. Queen e2, now there is material balance for the moment, but after the exchange of these additional pair of pawns, White's a pawn would become the hero after gaining a tempo with rook d6, and the Black Queen moving away. The pawn advances and Black is in serious trouble because of the powerful position of White's bishop on g2. So let's go back to see how the game continued after Rook went f to c1. Black played knight e5, a very logical move for now closing off the White bishop's attack from g2. Also, the White Queen is under attack. So White right now has to be very careful because Black is a knight up. White had to trade the bishop for the knight. Of course, it's very important to make sure that White wins the piece back. Pawn captured back. And now White has the time for a quiet move, playing knight f3, threatening to centralize the knight on d4, and more importantly, to attack that bishop and use the pin. If the Black Queen would try to get out of the pin and move to d7, White immediately could fork, not from d4, but e5 this time. Let's go back again to the position after knight f3. And also, if the queen would move to a more fortunate square, to b7, which did not step into the fork, White would still play knight d4, and then whether Black now protects the bishop with the rook or moves the bishop away, White all of a sudden would simply play b3, trapping Black's knight with a superior position. The actual game instead continued by Black playing rook f to c8. And White continues in a similar fashion, knight d4, queen d7, and now by playing b3. It wouldn't be a good idea to immediately try to win the knight back through these exchanges on c6 and then capturing the knight, because now black could move out of the pin with the rook. Remember all the pieces that are on unprotected squares. Since there is no more pin along the b file, the rook needs to move, and rook e2, and black is back in business. Let's go back. Queen d7, and white, as I mentioned, played b3, immediately going after black's knight. Black tries to hang on to his knight and played knight b2. And now, if white would play queen d2, black's plan was to play knight c4 with the idea that if white tries to win a pawn, with all these traits, all of a sudden, again, the unprotected piece would get white into trouble, and after queen d5, black would get the advantage, threatening checkmate and the rook at the same time. White can do better though. After knight b2, white played rook a to b1. Black played knight c4 anyway. Pawn captured. Now if black recaptures with the b pawn, then queen would take on b8 and the game would be pretty much over right away. So black had to capture with the d pawn. Now the white knight is under attack, so white had to make another forceful move and capture the bishop. The rook captured back. Now if white would just capture the pawn with d takes c4, black would all of a sudden create pin over this pawn and triple up on the c file, and white would have difficulty maintaining his extra pawn. Let's go back to the game, and in this position, white continued with rook to c4, using that same pin again. And this was the last critical moment of the game where black made a serious mistake by capturing and allowing queen takes b8, thinking that now after rook c8, the white queen is hanging, and when it moves away, black will have the opportunity to either capture on d3 or even advance the pawn to c3. However, black had to notice an unpleasant awakening that after pawn takes pawn, the queen is taboo because of black's back rank problem, and therefore now white is up 2 pawns for no real compensation. And white won the game pretty quickly. Just a couple of moves into the game, black played g6, opening up. Now the queen is hanging. Queen retreated to f4, protecting the pawn on c4. Black made a double attack on the pawns on c4 and e2. And now the saving move is to play rook b8. Rook takes, queen takes, king g7, and now with a well-placed check on b2, followed by advancing the c-pawn, white easily won the game. Let's go back just a little bit to the position right here where black captured white's rook on c4. Here there are some interesting other options that black could have tried. For example, if black right now would trade and play queen e6, attacking white's e2 pawn, white could simply protect that, still maintaining the pin along the b file. And just an interesting sample variation, rook c8, c5, although pawn takes pawn is interesting too. Queen d5 and rook d2, and black cannot capture the pawn again because of the back rank problem. Let's go back again just a bit. After knight takes and rook c4, Black's best chance in this position was the interesting rook e6. And things are not at all that simple right here, because black is pressuring the e2 pawn. Although white can maintain the extra pawn with queen b2, rook e8, rook c2. And now black has an interesting move, playing rook h6, trying to checkmate with queen h3 and such. h4, preventing those ideas. Now after g5, white can maintain the advantage with queen c1. Of course, tactics are always around. And for example, rook e6 going back, then rook c1, and at the end of the day, white is still better. Even though at one point or another it may require to give up that a5 pawn and to try to hurry up and advance the center pawns. And after this interesting middle game, let's go on and see an interesting and very practical theoretical endgame. Here we go. In this position, it is white's turn, and I have to tell you, at first it seems that white's position is completely hopeless. Black's rook and king are relatively close to white's pawn, and the white king seems to be pretty far in aiding that pawn. And nevertheless, this position is a theoretical draw. There is no way for black to win the game if white plays correctly. The first move, of course, is very, very natural, simply moving the king up to g4, trying to help the pawn on h6. If white wouldn't have moved forward towards his pawn on h6, black could have simply moved the rook to attack the pawn on h7 and then capture it. So this was a must move. Of course to g4 and not to h4, making sure the black king is being kept away as much as possible. Okay, so let's see what happens if black responds with king e5, trying to simply go towards the white pawn and capture it. Well, white needs to move forward and, equally importantly, to keep the black king away, as well as, of course, to support the white pawn on h6. King e6 and king g6. Now, finally, white is threatening to advance the pawn further to h7. Black played rook f1, and now this is an absolutely key moment in this endgame that I suggest you remember. It would be a losing mistake to advance the h-pawn, which looks like a quite natural move. Because now black can check, and after king h6, king f7, and if white promotes the pawn to a queen or rook, black will simply give a skewer with rook h1, and then the newly promoted piece is lost. The only piece white can promote that they will not lose immediately would be a knight. However, because the knight is in the corner, is also stuck and will be lost pretty soon. For example, after king h7, black could just play rook g2, and white would be in zugzwang, losing the knight. Yet, white can save the game. But how? In this position, after king g6 and rook f1, the important point is to move the king forward first. And now, after the rook g1 check, not to move in front of the pawn, in which case black would win. For example, king h8, king f7, h7, and now king g6. King g8, and the rook moves over, and again a checkmate problem on the 8th rank. Let's go back. So after the rook g1 check, this is the crucial moment. The king needs to go to f8, not to h8. King f6, h7, rook h1, king protects, rook g1, and again, where does the king need to go? Not to the corner, which would lose after king g6, but simply king f8, and black cannot make any progress. Let's go back again, just a little bit, into this endgame. So, what did we say? The king needs to come. There's no ifs and buts about that. King e5, king g5, king e6. So far, everything was very, very logical. White is moving the king up in order to be able to advance the pawn. And here, this is the crucial moment. White cannot advance the pawn without losing the game. White would play here king g7. And now, after rook g1, this is the picture you'd need to remember, that king f8 is the only move that draws the game. Any other move loses. Let's go back for just one moment and look at this position. What would happen if after king g7, black plays king e7? Well, naturally, white doesn't have much of a choice but to advance the pawn. Black can check, and then already the king needs to move in front of the pawn, because if it would move to h6, as we learned in one of the previous variations, the black king could move to f7, resulting in a winning position. Remember, if queen promotes or rook or bishop promotes, black just makes a skewer with rook h1, and if knight promotes, the knight never gets out of the corner alive. So therefore, in this position, the king already would move into the corner, because now the black king is just one move too late. It cannot get to the g file. And what that means is that if black does not want the game to end with stalemate, they will need to move the rook away from the g file. And then the king can simply get out, threatening the pawn to promote, and black will have to repeat moves or allow a draw in one other shape or form. This is a very, very important theoretical endgame. And finally, let's see the jewel of the week. Here we go. In this position, it seems that it's game over for white. The black pawn is about to get promoted on b1, and it's unstoppable. And yet, the beauty in chess shows that never give up, always search for the unexpected, and don't give up. Well, I suggest you take your time and try to figure out the correct solution on your own first before you listen further and look at the solution. And the solution is white playing king to a3. Well, so far not terribly difficult, because if black now promotes the pawn to a queen or rook even, the white bishop would appear on c3, attacking black's king and forcing black to give up the newly promoted piece. For example, right, pawn promotes, bishop checks, and queen blocks, and now, of course, the game is a draw. So, after king a3, the big question is, how will white save the game after knight to e4? Now the problem is that the bishop no longer can go to c3. But how about the bishop trying to get onto the same diagonal from a different square? Well, if the bishop tries to go to d8, wouldn't help, because the f6 square is already covered by black's knight. Okay, so how about after knight e4, moving bishop to c7? If pawn promotes, bishop e5, same deal. Well, now the problem is the knight will go to d2, preparing that if bishop e5 comes, knight c4, fork. And otherwise, if the bishop just makes a waiting move, black will make knight c4 check first, and then promote the pawn. So this didn't quite work out. How about bishop to b6? Well, now the problem is the knight coming to c3. And again, when the bishop comes to d4, the fork arrives from knight b5. So this doesn't seem to work out. Yet king a3 still saves the game. After knight e4, almost unbelievably, white can make a waiting move with the bishop on b4. And then, if the pawn promotes to a queen or rook, again bishop c3. But knight takes. True, but it's stalemate now. Pretty impressive, isn't it? Let's go back one more last time. After king a3, knight e4, bishop b4, how about if the black king tries to get out, get to the other side, to the c file, and then promote the pawn? Well, then the answer is king b3. If king goes back to the corner to a1, so will white. Play king a3, go back, just repeat moves. On the other hand, if the king would want to escape the other side, the bishop can pin the pawn, and again it's game over, draw. Well, I hope you enjoyed this amazing endgame, as well as the other examples in this lesson. Thank you for listening, and so long until next week.